She lost her diary in the Mafia boss's club. One line about a single mom stopped him cold. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Lily Adams had never imagined her life would intersect with the Mafia, especially not in a place like this. It was an upscale nightclub, hidden behind velvet ropes, where only the elite were allowed entry. She was there only to work, a waitress trying to make ends meet, balancing her demanding job with being a single mom to her 6-year-old son. She had no idea that tonight, her life would take a turn she couldn't have prepared for. The night started like any other, with the clinking of glasses and the low hum of conversations between the city's rich and powerful. Lily moved quietly through the crowd, offering drinks with a polite smile, doing her best to avoid drawing attention to herself. She had learned long ago that blending in was the safest way to navigate this world. But then, something happened. She lost her diary. She had been carrying it with her that night, a small leather-bound notebook where she kept her personal thoughts and memories. It was a way for her to escape the weight of her daily life, a place where she could dream of a future that seemed so far out of reach. One careless moment, and it was gone, slipped from her hands, landing somewhere in the dark, luxurious corners of the Mafia boss's club. As she searched frantically for it, her eyes met his. Dominic Romano. He stood at the center of the room, surrounded by men in dark suits, his presence commanding the space. His eyes were sharp, piercing, as though he could see through the layers of lies everyone wore. When their gazes locked, time seemed to slow. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The man wasn't just wealthy, he was dangerous. She had heard the whispers, the rumors. Dominic Romano was the head of a powerful empire, and no one crossed him without consequence. He wasn't the kind of man you ignored or offended. His stare lingered on her, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. But it wasn't just his gaze that unnerved her. It was what happened next. He walked towards her, his stride confident and purposeful. When he reached her, he didn't ask if she was okay, or why she was in a panic. Instead, he asked a simple question, a question that caught her completely off guard. What do you know about being a single mom? His voice was low, controlled, almost too calm for the situation. Lily blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. How did he know about her son? I don't know what you mean, she stammered, trying to steady her racing heart. But Dominic didn't look away. He didn't smile or show any sign of amusement. I think you know exactly what I mean, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement. Something in her mind clicked. This man, who exuded power and control, had just brought her to a place she hadn't expected. Her life, her struggles, her son's future, they were all suddenly in his hands. And in that moment, she realized that the diary wasn't the only thing she had lost tonight. I had no idea what to say. Dominic's question about being a single mom had thrown me off. I stood there, caught in the middle of a bustling, extravagant nightclub, surrounded by people I could never be like, yet suddenly under the scrutiny of the most powerful man in the room. I tried to steady my breath, my heart racing in my chest. I don't know what you mean, I stammered, my hands clutching the edges of the tray so tightly I thought it might break. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, his eyes still locked onto mine, as if searching for something in me, something I wasn't sure I wanted him to find. I think you do, Dominic replied, his voice low, almost soothing, yet commanding at the same time. The words felt like an invisible weight pressing down on me. I didn't know how to respond, didn't know if I even should. How could he know anything about my son, about my life? I had worked hard to keep all of it hidden, to protect him, to protect myself from the world I never wanted to be a part of. And yet here I was, facing a man who seemed to know everything, or at least enough to make me feel exposed. You've been struggling, he said finally, his voice softer now, but still laced with that undeniable authority. I can tell. And you're doing it alone. There was a quiet pause. His words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I thought he might be offering me sympathy. But there was something off about it, something that didn't sit right. I had heard the rumors about him, about his empire built on secrecy and power. Sympathy didn't seem like something he would offer. You have no idea what I'm going through. I managed, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain calm. Dominic raised an eyebrow, almost as if amused by my response. I don't need to know everything, he said. I know enough. His eyes didn't leave mine, and I could feel the weight of his gaze in a way that made me want to run, but I couldn't move. The entire room seemed to fade away, as if we were the only two people there. Look, I said, trying to regain some control, trying to force myself back into a space where I wasn't at his mercy. I don't know what you want from me, but I'm just trying to get through the night and make sure my son has what he needs. Dominic's expression softened, just slightly, but there was still that edge to him, that quiet menace that made it impossible to ignore his presence. I'm not here to take anything from you, he said, his voice almost too calm. I'm here to offer you something. A way out. A way out. I repeated, unsure if I had heard him correctly. From what? From the life you're living, he answered. From struggling. From worrying if you'll be able to feed your son tomorrow or pay rent. You're more than just a waitress, more than just a mother. You could be much more, if you let me help you. The words hit me like a cold wave, freezing me in place. I had never asked for help, never wanted it. I had always believed that if I worked hard enough, if I kept my head down, things would get better. But this man, standing in front of me, made it sound like he could give me everything I had ever wanted, and more. Why would you help me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want in return? Dominic took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. What do I want? He repeated, as though he were considering the question carefully. I want nothing more than to see you succeed, Lily. But in return, you'll have to accept the truth about the world you're in. His words were heavy with meaning, and I didn't fully understand what he meant, but somehow, I knew I was standing at the edge of something that could change my life forever. My instincts told me to walk away, to refuse whatever it was he was offering. But something in his gaze, something about the calm certainty in his voice, made it impossible to simply ignore him. I was trapped, caught between the life I knew and the unknown that Dominic was offering. And what if I refuse? I asked, more out of defiance than belief that I would actually turn him down. Dominic smiled, though it wasn't a friendly smile. It was calculating, like he already knew what I would say next. Then you stay where you are, he said, and continue living the same way you always have. There was a finality to his words that made my stomach tighten. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. I couldn't just walk away from this. Not anymore. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. Standing there in the midst of the noise and chatter of the club, I felt like I was in a completely different world, one I wasn't sure I belonged in. Dominic had offered me something I couldn't quite grasp, but the way he spoke, so sure, so calm, made me think he wasn't asking me to choose. It was as if he was telling me what I would do next. The thought unsettled me more than I cared to admit. The quiet tension between us seemed to stretch out forever as he waited for me to respond. I had to make a choice. But what choice was there? I had a son to think about, a future I could barely scrape together. I could keep working at the club, struggling to make ends meet, always wondering if I'd be able to provide enough for him. Or I could take a chance, step into this new world Dominic was offering, and hope that somehow it would be better than the one I was living. What's the catch? I finally managed to ask, the words feeling thick in my mouth. Dominic didn't smile. There's no catch, Lily, he said, his voice smooth like silk. You take what I offer, or you don't. But if you refuse, you stay stuck in the same place you've always been. No one gets out of this life without paying a price. His words sent a chill through me. I could see the world he was offering, could almost taste the freedom that came with it. It was tempting, but I wasn't sure I was ready to accept it, not without understanding what I was really stepping into. And what do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking slightly, unsure if I even wanted to hear the answer. Your loyalty, he said, his tone never wavering. That's all. No tricks, no hidden agenda. Just your loyalty. And in return, I'll make sure you never have to worry about your future again. You and your son will be taken care of. His words hung in the air like a promise, one I wasn't sure I could trust. But there was something in the way he spoke, something that made me want to believe him. It was the power he radiated, the confidence that he could make good on his offer. My instincts screamed at me to walk away, to protect myself and my son from whatever dangerous world he was offering me access to. But my mind kept returning to the same thought. What choice did I really have? I had spent my life fighting, barely keeping my head above water, doing everything I could to keep my son safe. But it was never enough. It wasn't enough to simply survive. And I realized, standing there in front of Dominic, that I wanted more than survival. I wanted a future. A real future. One where I wasn't always worried about how I was going to pay the next bill or where I was going to find enough hours to work. Dominic must have seen something shift in my expression, because his voice softened, just a little. You don't have to decide now, he said. But know that I'm not going anywhere. If you change your mind, I'll be here. But I don't wait forever. His words were final, and I knew that, whatever happened, I would never be the same again. I had a decision to make. A decision that would change everything. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But I knew one thing for certain. The life I had known, the one I had fought so hard to build, was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea what the next chapter would look like. I stood there, still processing Dominic's words, the weight of the decision settling in my chest like a stone. It felt like everything was changing, but nothing was clear. He offered me a way out, a chance to escape the life I had been barely surviving. But at what cost? Was I willing to give him my loyalty, my trust, in exchange for a future where I didn't have to worry every single day? Dominic was right about one thing. I couldn't keep living the way I had been, running from one job to the next, barely scraping by. My son deserved better, and deep down, I knew that. But was this really the answer? Was Dominic really someone I could trust? Or was this all part of a dangerous game he was playing, one I wouldn't be able to escape from once I stepped in? I didn't have the answers, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that lingered in my chest, the one that said this moment was pivotal. I had already walked so far into his world just by standing here. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Dominic had noticed me, not just as a waitress, but as something more. That was both thrilling and terrifying. I'll think about it, I finally said, my voice more confident than I felt. Dominic studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, I thought he might push me, force me to make a decision on the spot. But instead, he nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. You do that, he said softly, almost as if he were giving me space, though I knew better than to think he didn't already have a plan in place for whatever decision I made. Just remember, Lily, he added, his voice now low, I don't wait forever. His words sent a shiver through me, but there was something in them that also sparked a feeling I couldn't quite place. Was it fear, or was it excitement? Either way, the choice I had to make wasn't one I could avoid. As Dominic walked away, his presence still heavy in the air, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I was free to make my own choice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I decided would tie me to him in ways I couldn't yet understand. The night went on around me, but I was no longer part of it. My mind was racing, replaying every word Dominic had said, every glance, every shift in his demeanor. Was I really ready to step into that world, to accept the protection he offered? The Mafia boss was offering me a way out, a way to take control of my future, but at what cost? The more I thought about it, the clearer the answer became. I had spent my whole life fighting to survive, but survival wasn't enough anymore. I wanted more for my son, for myself. But the road ahead was unknown, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. The sound of the club's music felt distant now, like it belonged to another world. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud in my ears, as I made my decision. I would take the offer. I would trust Dominic Romano, even if I didn't fully understand what I was getting myself into. I had to. My son had to have a future, and this was the only chance I had to give it to him. I walked away from Dominic that night with my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. It was a strange feeling, knowing I had just made a choice that could change my life forever. I had agreed to his offer, but I still didn't fully understand what that meant. What kind of world was I about to enter? What would happen to me, to my son, once I stepped into it? As the night went on, the club's music, the laughter, the chatter, all faded into the background. It felt like I had entered a new world, one where I was no longer just a waitress, no longer just a struggling mother. I was something more now. But what exactly, I didn't know. My mind kept circling back to Dominic's words, his cold but calm assurance. I don't wait forever. The way he said it, like he knew something I didn't, like he was certain I would make the right choice. And now, here I was, standing on the edge of something dangerous, yet so tempting. The next morning, the phone call came. It was Dominic's voice, smooth and certain, as always. "Lily, it's time," he said, the words making me feel both calm and panicked at the same time. "Meet me at my office in 2 hours. We'll go over everything." I knew what that meant. It was time to leave my old life behind. I had no idea what to expect when I arrived. His office was in one of the most luxurious buildings in the city, the kind of place where only the elite went. As I walked through the doors, the feeling of entering a new world washed over me. The security, the sleek design, everything about it screamed power and control. Dominic was waiting for me in his office, leaning back in his chair, his eyes focused on something in front of him. He didn't look up when I entered, but I could feel his presence filling the room. "Take a seat," he said, his voice still calm. But now there was an undertone of something I couldn't quite place. Authority? Confidence? Maybe both. I sat across from him, my hands trembling slightly, but I kept my posture straight. I wasn't going to show any fear. "I'm glad you're here, Lily," he said, finally looking up at me. His gaze was intense, like he was evaluating me, deciding what kind of person I was, or what I would become. "This is where it starts." "Where what starts?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your new life," Dominic replied. "Your life with me. With us. I told you I would help you. I'm not a man who makes empty promises." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "But there are rules. There are things you need to understand if you want to be part of this world. The world I can offer you." I swallowed hard, trying to prepare myself for whatever came next. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I knew I couldn't go back. "Not now." "What kind of world?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dominic smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in it. "The kind of world where you don't have to worry about your son's future. Where you don't have to scrape by, work multiple jobs just to survive. Where you're taken care of. Protected." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Protected?" "Yes," he said, his voice low and steady. "I can protect you, Lily. I can give you everything you've ever wanted. But you have to trust me. You have to follow the rules." "What are the rules?" I asked, my heart racing. Dominic's eyes locked onto mine, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. "The rules are simple. Loyalty, trust, and knowing your place. You'll learn what that means soon enough." I didn't understand everything, but something in his words made me believe him. He wasn't just talking about power. He was talking about control, and I had just stepped into his world. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision I had made settling in. There was no turning back now. "Good," Dominic said, standing up and walking around his desk. He reached out and placed his hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a friendly gesture, but it wasn't threatening either. It was possessive, like he was marking me as his own. "From this moment on, you're part of this. Welcome to my world, Lily." I didn't know if I was ready for what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had just changed, and I had no idea where it was going to lead. I sat in the car as it sped through the streets of the city, the night lights reflecting off the window, but my mind wasn't on the sights outside. I couldn't stop thinking about what Dominic had said, what he was offering. I had crossed a line, stepping into a world I didn't understand, a world that promised everything, but also seemed to carry a heavy price. Dominic had made it clear that I was in, that my life had changed. But as the car pulled into the private entrance of his estate, I couldn't shake the unease settling deep inside me. The mansion in front of me was massive, more like a fortress than a home, with iron gates, tall stone walls, and guards standing at attention. This wasn't the kind of place I was used to, and for a moment, I felt small, out of place. The car stopped, and before I could even open the door, one of Dominic's men was there to escort me inside. "Come with me," he said, his tone respectful but firm. I followed him through the ornate halls, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The mansion was everything I had imagined and more. Grand marble floors, expensive paintings on the walls, and chandeliers that could have belonged in a palace. But the beauty of it all didn't mask the overwhelming feeling of power that hung in the air. Everything here was carefully curated, designed to project wealth, control, and influence. We stopped in front of a large door, and my escort knocked softly before pushing it open. Inside was Dominic, sitting behind a massive desk, his posture as commanding as ever. "Lily," he said, his voice smooth and calm as usual. "Come in." We need to talk. I stepped into the room, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me like a thick fog. I had agreed to this, to his offer, but what now? What was I supposed to do in this world? Sit, Dominic said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I did as he instructed, my heart pounding in my chest. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes calculating, assessing. I could tell he was waiting for me to say something, to ask questions, but I didn't know where to begin. You're probably wondering what happens next, he said, leaning forward slightly, his fingers steepled in front of him. I nodded, unsure of what to expect. This is your new life, he continued. You'll learn everything you need to know as we go. But for now, the most important thing is your role. You're part of this now. You'll work with us, do what's asked of you, and in return, I'll make sure you and your son are safe. You'll never have to worry again. His words were reassuring, but there was something unsettling about the way he said them. He made it sound like there was no way out, no room for hesitation. What do you expect from me? I finally asked, my voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at me. Dominic's gaze didn't waver. Loyalty, he said, his tone final. That's all. Your loyalty and your trust. I'll take care of the rest. I took a deep breath, absorbing his words. Loyalty. Trust. In this world, those words meant something completely different than they did in mine. I knew that now. What exactly am I supposed to do? I asked, still unsure of where I fit into all of this. Dominic leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. For now, you're going to focus on what I've asked you to do. You're going to work with my people, follow the instructions, and build your place in this world. That's it. He paused, watching me closely. If you do that, things will go smoothly. If you don't, well, we both know that's not an option. I felt the chill in his words, the unspoken threat that hung between us. There was no room for mistakes in this world. No second chances. And for the first time, I understood the gravity of the decision I had made. My future wasn't mine to control anymore. It was his. I looked at Dominic, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what he really wanted from me. But all I saw was a man who held all the cards. He wasn't asking for my help. He was telling me how it was going to be. I understand, I said, my voice quieter now, the weight of it all pressing on my chest. Dominic nodded, his eyes softening for the briefest moment. Good. I knew you would. He stood up then, walking around the desk to stand next to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, the touch surprisingly gentle, and for a moment, I felt like he was trying to reassure me. You're not alone in this, Lily, he said softly. We'll make sure you're taken care of. But you have to trust us. Trust me. His words echoed in my mind long after he spoke them. Trust. The one thing I had never given anyone. And now, here I was, standing on the precipice of a new life, about to give it to the last person I ever thought I would. The decision was made. There was no going back. I spent the next few days trying to adjust to this new reality, to the life Dominic had promised me. I still didn't fully understand the extent of what I had agreed to, but I knew one thing for sure. I had stepped into a world I couldn't easily walk away from. The mansion became my new home, though it felt like a prison at times. Everything about it was grand, beautiful, even, but the coldness of it, the starkness of the walls, made it feel impersonal. It wasn't my home. Not yet. The staff was polite, efficient, always watching me with their guarded expressions. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were all part of something far larger than I was even beginning to understand. I went through the motions, breakfast in the morning, meetings in the afternoon. But in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my room, I couldn't help but feel like I was losing myself. I had no idea where my place was in all of this. Dominic was everywhere. His presence loomed over the estate, over my every move. He was kind in his own way, but there was a distance to him, a coldness that reminded me that he wasn't here to be my friend. He was here to make sure I fulfilled my role. He didn't ask much from me, at least not directly. But the work he expected from me, the loyalty, was always there. And the more I gave, the more I understood that nothing in his world came without a price. One evening, he called me into his office again. This time, there was something different in his demeanor. Something more serious, more urgent. Lily, we need to talk, he said as I walked into the room. I've been keeping an eye on your progress, and I think it's time you understood more of what you're involved in. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had a feeling this moment was coming, but I wasn't ready for it. What do you mean? I asked, my voice steady despite the unease swirling in my stomach. Dominic leaned forward, his eyes intense, never leaving mine. "I've been patient," he said, "but you need to understand something. You're not just here to be a part of this family. You're here because you have value. I'm not asking for your loyalty just to protect you. I'm asking because you have a part to play. A bigger part than you think." His words were like ice in my veins. What did he mean by a part to play? What was he expecting from me? "You've been given a chance," he continued, his voice low. "A chance to do more than survive. To thrive. But that comes with responsibility. And if you can't handle that responsibility, then you'll be discarded like everyone else who has failed me." His words were sharp, and there was no mistaking the threat behind them. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure. I had no choice but to follow through. I had made a deal, and now it was time to honor it. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dominic's eyes softened, just for a moment, before he straightened up. "I need you to take control of the situation. You'll be working with my team. I need you to help manage the business, help smooth things over where there's tension. You're good at reading people, Lily. Use that to your advantage." I wasn't sure what I was hearing. A part of me wanted to back away, to refuse, but the other part, the part that had been struggling for so long, knew that this was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I didn't belong here, not really, but this was a chance to make something of myself, to finally stop worrying about how to survive. "And what happens if I don't?" I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. Dominic didn't flinch. "Then you'll leave. But that's not an option for you, Lily. Not anymore." I looked at him, trying to figure out what he was really asking, what he expected from me. But all I saw was a man who was already 5 steps ahead, who had already mapped out my future without asking for my opinion. He wasn't giving me a choice, not really. I had already made my decision. There was no turning back now. I had no idea what I was stepping into. I had agreed to everything Dominic had said, but now, as I sat in the meeting room with his team, the weight of it all hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. They were all there, men in dark suits, their eyes cold, calculating. They looked at me like I was something they had to get used to, not someone who belonged. And I felt that. I didn't belong here, but I was determined to make it work. "Lily," Dominic's voice cut through the tension. "This is where you start. We need you to get a sense of things, understand how we operate." I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, but I knew I had to start somewhere. Dominic continued, laying out the tasks in front of me. "You'll be managing our resources, making sure the right people are in the right places. I don't need someone who's afraid to make tough decisions. You're here because I believe you can do it." I didn't answer right away. It was a lot to take in. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about following orders. This was about stepping up, taking control, and proving I had what it took to be part of this world. "I understand," I said finally, my voice steady. Dominic gave me a slight smile, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good. We'll see if you really do." The rest of the meeting went by in a blur. I was bombarded with information, names, schedules, projects, things I was supposed to manage, things I was supposed to keep track of. It felt like I was sinking in quicksand, but I didn't dare show it. I couldn't. Dominic was watching, and I knew he wouldn't tolerate weakness. When the meeting finally ended, I walked out of the room, feeling more out of place than ever. This was his world, and I was just trying to fit in. But I was determined to make it work. I had no other choice. The next few days were a blur. I was thrown into the deep end with little to no guidance, expected to handle situations I had no experience with. But each time I stumbled, Dominic was there, watching. His eyes always on me, like he was waiting for me to fail, but also ready to catch me if I didn't. And in a strange way, that pushed me harder. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to show him that I could do this, that I was more than just a single mom trying to survive. I was someone who could thrive in this world, someone who belonged. But as the days passed, I started to feel the pressure. It wasn't just the work, it was everything. The way everyone looked at me, the way I felt like I was constantly being tested. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. I had no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation. Everything I did, every decision I made, felt like it had the potential to change my life, to change everything. But what scared me more than anything was the way Dominic started to look at me. He wasn't just watching me as a business partner. There was something else in his gaze now, something I couldn't quite place. Something that made my heart race whenever he was near. I knew I had to focus on the job, on proving myself. But every time I looked at him, every time our eyes met, I felt a pull, an attraction that made everything else fade into the background. I tried to ignore it, to push it aside, but it was there, lingering like a storm on the horizon. I didn't know what it meant, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. But I couldn't deny it, it was there. And the more time I spent in Dominic's world, the more I realized that nothing in this life, nothing in his world, was ever simple. There was always more beneath the surface, always something hidden, something waiting to be uncovered. And I had a feeling that the more I uncovered, the harder it would be to walk away. I could feel the tension building inside me as the days passed. Every moment I spent in Dominic's world, I was more aware of how much was at stake. The work was demanding, the expectations high, but it wasn't just that. It was the pull between Dominic and me that I couldn't ignore. He had always been a man of control, of power, and I had seen it in every move he made. But it wasn't just the business side of him that intrigued me. It was the complexity of his nature, the quiet intensity that he held. Beneath the surface, there were moments, brief ones, when he would look at me, and I would see something in his eyes that made my heart race. A flicker of something more than business, something personal. But I couldn't afford to focus on that. I couldn't afford to let anything distract me from what I was here to do. I had a son to take care of. I had to prove myself, not just to Dominic, but to everyone in this world that I wasn't meant to be a part of. Yet, no matter how hard I tried to focus on my role, to immerse myself in the work, I kept feeling that pull towards him. It wasn't just the attraction, it was the feeling of being seen, of being noticed in a way I had never experienced before. Dominic watched me, studied me in ways that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. It was unsettling, but at the same time, it made me feel powerful, important in a way I had never known. One evening, after a long day of meetings and reports, Dominic asked me to meet him in his office. I knew what that meant. It wasn't just a routine check-in. He wanted to talk. As I walked into his office, I could feel the weight of the moment. He was sitting at his desk, his usual calm demeanor present, but there was something different in the air. Something that made me nervous, made my heart beat a little faster. "Lily," he said, his voice smooth, yet there was a hint of something more serious. "Come in. I need to discuss something important." I nodded, walking toward the chair opposite him. As I sat down, he didn't immediately speak. He just studied me, as if measuring every part of me. "You've done well," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Better than I expected, actually." The words made me tense. I wasn't sure how to take that. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "But there's more to this than just following orders. There's something about you, something I've been watching for a while now. And I think you know what I mean." I felt my breath catch. This wasn't just about the job anymore. It wasn't just about loyalty. It was something more personal. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked toward me. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something, to give me some kind of answer that would explain everything. But instead, he placed his hand on the back of my chair, leaning down just enough so I could feel the heat of his presence. "I'm not asking for your loyalty just to have control over you, Lily," he said, his voice low and intense. "I'm asking because I see something in you. Something you don't even know is there. And I want to see how far you can go." His words sent a shiver through me. I had been so focused on the surface, on the work, on the role I was supposed to play. But now, I realized that this was about more than just that. This was about a connection I hadn't even begun to understand. I wasn't just a pawn in his world. I was something more. "I don't know what you mean," I said, though I could feel the truth of his words resonating within me. Dominic straightened, his hand still resting on the back of my chair, his presence filling the room. "You will," he said, his voice almost a promise. "You'll understand soon enough." And in that moment, I knew. I was no longer just here to survive. I was here to become something else, something Dominic saw in me. And I didn't know what that would mean for my future, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to walk away from it. Not now. Not when I had already come this far.